So I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well-deserved, and you should get it.
Coming from you in particular, this is very meaningful. Thank you very much. I'm stopping wars. I'm stopping wars. And I hate to see people killed.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu showing his faith that President Trump will bring peace to the region as he visits the White House to prep for ceasefire talks and to discuss Iran. Let's bring in former Secretary of State and Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. I want to get your reaction to not only the letter that Netanyahu gave President Trump about the nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize, but also that statement where President Trump said, "I'm stopping wars, knowing what's on the horizon lying ahead."
Well, good morning. Not only is he putting an end to wars, he's redrawing the lines of stability and peace in the Middle East. We saw that in the first Trump administration with the Abraham Accords, with, for the first time in decades, many nations recognizing the fundamental right of Israel to exist and working together cooperatively for peace and prosperity. And now, combined with the work that Israel did on the ground in Iran and the President Trump's bold decision to go after the nuclear sites in Tehran, we can see Iran on its back foot and the region more peaceful and more stable. It's a great outcome. There's probably still work to do. I know they're trying to negotiate this ceasefire with Hamas. Good luck. I haven't seen the Hamas folks give a single inch. I pray that those hostages are released soon. And they're going to try and negotiate with the Iranians. I think, too, there's a red line for the Iranians on enrichment. That will be a hard negotiation. But President Trump demonstrated willingness to use American power in the most fundamentally important way, gives an opportunity to convince the regime in Iran to stop its foolish ways and to ultimately come back into the world in a way that is decent and not continue to head down the path of becoming a nuclear state and continue as the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism.
Yeah, and to your point, Mr. Secretary, President Trump talked about the Iranian talks that will soon happen. Listen here.
We have scheduled Iran talks, and they want to talk. They took a big drubbing, I think, when we hit the three sites. Really, they want to meet. They want to meet. They want to work something out. No, they're different. They're very different now than they were 2 weeks ago. They were the bully of the Middle East, and now they're not the bully anymore.
Your reaction?
Well, I hope they're not the bully anymore. I know they are chastened. There's no doubt about that. But the Iranians have shown over decades, since 1979, that they're willing to continue to be silly in terms of taking care of their own people and defending their own country and do things that actually harm their own nation. President Trump has shown that he's willing to use force. He's willing to use power. Those are the kinds of things that give negotiators, as I was when I was a Secretary of State, right, diplomats, a chance. A negotiation absent the show of force or the willingness to use power is basically just surrender. President Trump has flipped the script on that conversation, and I hope that when the Iranians meet with the Americans or meet with the Israelis, whoever it is going to sit across the table from them, that they understand that the Americans are willing to continue to do this until they actually behave in a way that protects Americans every day and always.
And Mr. Secretary, just lastly, I do want to get to news about the president saying he will now send some defensive weapons to Ukraine. Listen here.
I'm not happy with President Putin at all, but this is something that would have never happened if I were president. This was a war that was never going to happen.
Mr. President, are you planning to send more weapons to Ukraine?
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now.
Your thoughts, Mr. Secretary, on where things stand and this, obviously, news development?
You know, this is pretty consistent from President Trump. It's worth the world being reminded that President Trump was the first president to send defensive weapon systems to Ukraine back in his first term when President Obama had steadfastly refused to protect the Ukrainian people. It's in America's interest that Vladimir Putin not win this war. I think President Trump can see that Putin has not been acting in good faith. There's no interest in Putin conducting a ceasefire in the way the Ukrainians have agreed to. I think President Trump's decision, the statement he made last night, is the right one. This will demonstrate to Vladimir Putin that the United States is not going to force Ukraine to surrender and that he ought to come to the table and negotiate a peaceful resolution to this conflict and stop killing Ukrainian kids.
So does that mean that President Trump needs to take a tougher line with Putin? Because it's clearly he's not playing ball.
Yes, I think that's undoubtedly true. And frankly, I think he has. He's doing it in so many ways, right? Think about the fact that we have now lower energy prices. That hurts Vladimir Putin's economy. What the president did when he went to The Hague and met with NATO and convinced the folks at NATO to spend 5% of their wealth on their own defense, that is a strong statement about President Trump's commitment to protecting Americans from threats like those from Vladimir Putin. I think he has taken a very strong line. I hope he will continue to do that. We're going to have to put pressure on Vladimir Putin to get him to stand down. There's no doubt about that.
We shall see where it goes. Thank you for taking time. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.